I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for watching Fox 35 News Plus as we talk with the candidates for Florida governor in 2026. Today, we're sitting down with Republican Congressman Byron Donalds. Congressman, on this Saturday, we are catching up with you here at the Villages. You just finished up a campaign event talking to a couple hundred people out there, it looked like. They had the chance to ask you a lot of questions. So just talk to me about the campaign trail and what you're seeing from voters that you're getting the chance to talk to all across the state.
Well, the campaign trail has been great. It's actually been a lot of events like this. We've been in 50 counties in Florida already. We're going to get to the other 17. We're going to do a couple reruns, second time here in the Villages. Really excited. I think the biggest thing is, it's about talking about the issues that matter to the people of Florida. We do a lot of Q&A sessions with voters where they just come in, they have their question heard. Sometimes it gets opened up to the floor and we just see what else people want to talk about. You want to make sure you're addressing a couple of key concerns. Number one, Governor DeSantis has done a great job. People want to make sure the state's going to continue in the direction that it's going. We are committed to that. I voted for a lot of his agenda when I was in the state house, his first 2 years as governor. And, in my time in Congress, still standing for conservative principles up there, although it's a lot harder to get it accomplished in Washington for obvious reasons. But then number two, talking about taxes, insurance, water quality, transportation, the future of the state's economy, education for our kids. These are all still going to be the issues that need to be addressed going forward, and I'm definitely prepared to meet that challenge and excited for the opportunity to lead Florida into the future.
We'll get into a lot of those issues that we know are important to Florida voters, but I first want to ask you, why potentially leave Congress to run for governor here in Florida? What made you want to take that step and make that decision?
Well, first, Florida's future really does matter to America, and our state's going to need a governor who, number one, knows the apparatus here in Florida, but then also in Washington. That's going to be very important. Number two, a governor who has really good ties with the presidential administration to be able to advocate for Florida's interest at a moment's notice. That's going to be critical, especially around times of storms and things like that. But then the third thing is my career, my background was in finance, financial services, banking, insurance. These are all going to be important things that the state's going to have to figure out, especially insurance going into the future. And last but not least, Florida needs a conservative governor to follow in the footsteps of Ron DeSantis, who is a conservative governor. And I fit that bill as well. So when it came time to starting to think about that, I decided probably the next thing for me was to throw my hat in the ring and run for governor. And it's been going very well. I'm very excited about the progress, but we still have a long way to go. We want to make sure we're earning the vote of the people of Florida.
You mentioned President Trump. You do have the endorsement of President Trump. I'm curious how that came about. Did he talk to you about it ahead of time, or how did that kind of go down?
I mean, he and I talked about it off and on, but mostly it was focused on first, helping him to get elected back in 2024, and then in early 2025 about the work on his agenda in Congress. And he asked me, he's like, "Is this what you want to do?" And I said, "Yeah, it's what I want to do." And he was like, "Okay," and he made a decision. I was actually in Naples when he made the decision to endorse me. I was in an event with another member of Congress and people in Southwest Florida. And so I got the phone call from the president, and obviously you got to pick up his call. And so I'm in the middle of the event, I answered his call, and he told me about it. So I'm incredibly honored to have President Trump's endorsement because he doesn't give it lightly. He has a lot of criteria for it, but the number one thing is that he wants his now home state to continue to thrive, continue to be vibrant, and that's why I'm honored to have his endorsement to be Florida's next governor.
Let's talk affordability. Those were the first few questions we heard here.
Of course.
Those are often the questions that we hear. We know that is a top issue on voters' minds. How did we get here to where some say an affordability crisis here in the state of Florida right now? How did we get here?
Well, first of all, you got to acknowledge the reality, not just in Florida, but around the United States. What we had was terrible economic policy from Joe Biden and the Democrats, which created an inflation that ripped through our entire economy, and no industry was safe from it. We all remember coming out of COVID, prices just started skyrocketing. And that's because the Biden administration was spending so much money at a time where they created a labor shortage, and that's how we got to where we are. Here in Florida, because people were trying to escape New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Illinois, California, housing prices went up because people were just buying property in our state. That's how we got here. The question is, what are we going to do about it? I think, number one, obviously what the governor wants to do around property tax elimination for homesteaded Floridians, I fully support the governor's plan. Hope he and the legislature can get to an agreement so we can get that on the ballot this year. When it comes to insurance, like I said out there, the governor and the legislature did some very important tort reforms around property insurance and auto insurance that are stabilizing rates in property and casualty and auto insurance rates. Those rates are coming down. We want to continue to follow up on that work and then re-examine the state's entire insurance regulatory framework so we can find ways to bring new carriers into the state, continue to allow for more competition, which will further push insurance rates down. But then those are the first two. But number three overall is, how do you build out the homes that we're going to need going forward? We want to be efficient with people's time. We don't want to have people bogged down in red tape and bureaucracy when they're trying to build new homes and build, in some respects, new apartments. Because when you have dead time in projects, that's not free. It still costs the end user that money. The developers and the contractors, they don't pay that bill. It's passed on to the consumer. So from a government side, we want to be efficient with the development of these projects. If you can build housing more quickly, it actually decreases the cost of housing. That's going to have a major impact for the future of our state.
I was going to ask about housing costs and housing supply, and how do you balance that as well with making sure we don't overdevelop
of course.
As a state?
Listen, overdevelopment is something I don't want. Nobody wants to see that. I think we have to be strategic about planning the future of the state's growth by regions. I think that's going to be very important. It's about getting the various counties in a region on the same page about permitting timelines, about where you're going to build housing and where you're going to maintain the rural fringe, where you're going to protect agriculture lands, where you're going to protect conservation areas, where you're going to protect water quality. That's all important. It's a part of the beauty of Florida. And as I've traveled the state, like I said, I've been in 50 counties. In my time in government, whether that's in Congress the last 5 years or in the State House the 4 years before that, I've been in every county in our state. We have a beautiful state that we want to maintain, we want to protect, but you also have to have a plan for how you're going to build the new housing that we're going to need into the future. If you don't do that, then what's going to happen is the price of all housing is going to continue to go up, and that's not in the best interest of Floridians either.
Look, I do want to ask you about property taxes and the concerns we heard from one voter out here today about what it means for revenue of local governments and some of the services that we rely on, and that is something that we have seen in polling is a concern of folks all around Florida about what the impact would be. I think everyone would like to say, well, I don't want to, I don't have to pay property taxes. That's great. But how do you address some of those concerns about what it would mean for the services that local communities and people rely on?
Well, look, I support what the governor's trying to accomplish. I want to make sure that our sheriffs, our police officers, firefighters, the road construction, our schools, our maintenance, that stuff, it continues to be handled. Looking forward to seeing the governor's plan. His plan is going to be detailed to address all these things, and I think he, working with the legislature, that's where a lot of the details around this very question you're talking about are really going to get hammered out. If they're not able to accomplish something, then it's going to be my responsibility as the state's next governor to try to provide that relief for homeowners in our state, because that is important. We have to remember that people who make Florida their home, they're not a piggy bank for local governments. And so local governments do have a responsibility to contain their costs, control their costs, lower them where they can, because seniors on fixed incomes or young families just starting out, they don't have the resources to just pay higher and higher property taxes. So there's a real balance there. I think removing homestead property taxes is important for the future of the state, but we have to balance that and mitigate that with what we have to do to continue services. But like I said out there, around 75 to 80% of all property taxes in our state are non-homestead property taxes. About 20 to 25% are homestead property taxes. So there's a way where we can still address the needs that local governments have, that citizens have for services, which are critical, garbage pickup, wastewater treatment facilities, all those issues that local government has to manage, while also not increasing the cost burden on people who call Florida their home.
Let's talk about immigration. We know right now the state is playing a large role when it comes to
Yes.
Illegal immigration enforcement and getting national attention for the kind of role that we're playing as a state right now. Would that continue
Yes.
under a Donalds administration?
Yes, it's going to continue. We are going to continue to cooperate with President Trump and his team around supporting frankly, the mandate from the American people. I was on the campaign trail with the president just as much as anybody. It's a mandate from the American people. No matter what part of the state of the country we were in, it was clear Americans wanted to see criminal illegal aliens being sent back to their home countries, and they wanted to see the border secured. The border secured is a mission accomplished from President Trump. He's already been able to do that. Now it's the responsibility of states working with the federal government to get these criminal illegal aliens out of our state and out of our country, and we're going to be committed to that work the same way Governor DeSantis is.
There have been some questions and concerns about due process for these people who've been detained. How do you respond to those questions and concerns?
Well, first of all, if you're in the country illegally, you do not have the same level of due process as an American citizen. Let's be very clear on this. The Constitution is clear. The Supreme Court has been clear on this. There is not the same level that you or I or any citizen of our country would have with respect to due process. You simply do not, because you're not in the country legally. And so there is a process to go through deportation. There is what happens now is your identity is checked, your documentation is checked. If you're here illegally in the country, then we go through that process before the deportation detainer is issued, and then you're removed from the United States. That is the due process afforded to an illegal alien in the United States. But it needs to be understood by, frankly, everybody. This is not even a political question. For all people in our country, all citizens in our country, the level of due process for an American citizen is not the level for an illegal alien. Just like if an American citizen goes abroad, you do not maintain American due process at the standard of the United States Constitution and of American law if you're in another country. You simply don't.
After the ICE shooting in Minnesota this week, we heard the Democratic mayor of Minneapolis say that having ICE agents and a presence like that in communities causes chaos. What do you say about that?
He's a clown. The mayor of Minneapolis is a fool. And part of the reason that Minneapolis is in the shape that it's in is because of him. The reality is that you cannot have sanctuary jurisdictions in your country. How do you have a situation where there are rules in a city that are different from the federal rules when it comes to immigration? That dislocation is not being brought by the federal government or the Trump administration. That's being brought by people like Mayor Fry, like people like Governor Walz, Governor Newsom, Governor Pritzker, Governor Hochul. Probably we'll find out very shortly. He's already talked about it. Mayor Mamdani in New York. They are the ones creating these dislocations and these issues, not federal law enforcement. We have to understand that when Joe Biden was president of the United States, they were not following federal immigration law. They were ignoring that law. They were subverting the law. They were not enforcing it. Donald Trump won a political mandate. He swept the battleground states. He won the popular vote on the mandate of securing this nation and deporting criminal illegal aliens. So if you're a mayor in Minneapolis, you don't have the legal authority to stop ICE from actually following federal law. You don't have that ability. You can make whatever statement you want, but it doesn't coincide with the law. And I will add, especially in light of the shooting, it's people like Mayor Fry that have incited a lot of this unrest, where people don't know which way is coming or going. Because they're gaslighting, they're issuing propaganda. He's told ICE that they have to get out of Minneapolis in order for it to be safe. That is a lie. Simply not true. The truth is you have some of these Democrat officials who are either directly in cahoots or fully in support of these front groups, these paid for front groups, these paid agitators who are trying to stop ICE from continuing its mission. And that's simply not going to be tolerated in the state of Florida. I can't worry about the state of Minnesota, but what's happening there is wrong. And a lot of the images people are seeing on TV now is because you have Democrat officials who want wide open borders, they want no immigration checks, they want our communities to be overrun, and that is not fair and it's not right to the American people trying to find a way just to make ends meet and build the American dream for themselves.
Let's talk education. I know it's an issue that is important to you and to your wife as well.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about school vouchers in Florida, and you're seeing, parents obviously have a lot. We're seeing the appetite for that. How do you make sure, though, that the public schools are still adequately funded as they lose students?
Well, listen, first of all, funding in the public school system is predicated on enrollment. If children are enrolled in traditional public schools, the money follows the child. The same way, if a parent decides they want to enroll their child in a private school or a charter school, or they want to homeschool, the money follows the child that way as well. So if for the superintendents in our state and the traditional public schools in our state, if you want to have more students enrolling in your schools, you got to make sure you're providing a better output. That's what we should be doing. Listen, I think that we should be funding the education of the public. That's been my position for more than 15 years. And what that means is the money follows the child. If traditional public schools want more enrollments in their schools, then you have to do a better job. And you have to prove to parents that you're doing a better job. That's what matters. In terms of, that's how they get their funding today. And let's talk about on the local level, property taxes. Every school district in our state is a taxing district. They have the ability to leverage property taxes, and they all do. And what's happening in a lot of our large counties is that their populations are decreasing, but they're still leveraging the property taxes. So how is that fair to the taxpayer? We're always going to have a traditional public school system in our state, primarily because the public schools have more infrastructure than anybody. They have more seats than anybody. They have more buildings than anybody. They have the football fields. They have the basketball gyms. They got the baseball fields, and they got the weight rooms. So they're always going to be a part of Florida. But the decider of where that money goes is going to be parents. Parents are at the head of the table in the state of Florida. That will remain.
Do you think teachers are paid enough here?
I think teachers, we got to find ways to pay them more. I think so. And we got to be creative about ways that we do it. But let's be clear, teachers are professionals. They need to be treated like professionals. Right now, as we pay teachers, we don't treat them as professionals. It's a sliding scale payment system in Florida. You're paid the same base rate, and then you get additional kickers based upon how many years that you serve or how many other credentials that you have. That's how we pay our teachers in Florida. I would love teachers to be paid as professionals. You are paid for how well you do. And I think that's what everybody would want to see. That's my opinion.
Higher education, it's been years since Florida has had to raise in-state tuition. Is that something that you would like to see continue, and would it be feasible to see continue into the future?
I don't think it's feasible to have to raise tuition in our state, because look at the output of our university system. We have the best university system in the country. Our young people are graduating with great degrees. The thing I want to see going forward is that we make sure that they're graduating with degrees that are economically viable. Every college degree is not the same. Let's be honest about that. And if you're going to talk about college education at large, let's also talk about making sure that our kids coming out of high school are on a pathway to success. It's not just about going to the university system. It's about what credential do you need, what's going to help you put food on the table, what's going to help you be able to raise a family, what's going to be able to help you pay your rent and actually, or pay your mortgage if you have an ability to buy a home. And whether it's high school, the state college system, or the state university system, we want every child in Florida to be on a pathway to economic success. That's going to be the future of Florida. In terms of tuition in the university system, I see no reason why we would even need to talk about raising tuition, because last time I checked, when I see some of our universities, the buildings all look great and new. The kids are getting degrees, and they're working hard every single day in our classrooms. So it's not about raising tuition. That's not the answer. It's about making sure our kids are on a pathway to viability. And as long as our kids are on a pathway to being economically viable, having the skills they need, having the credentials they need, and the training they need, then I don't think we have to worry about raising revenues.
Healthcare. If the Obamacare subsidies expire, we've seen reports of premiums going through the roof in some cases. There's no state that could be impacted more by that than Florida, because of the number of folks who use those similar plans. Right. Do you believe the state should play a role in doing more to kind of help with that?
With subsidies?
With affordable health care for folks when it comes to things like Medicaid and things like that. Should there be a larger role that the state plays to make sure costs stay down for people?
Well, first and foremost, we're not going to expand Medicaid in our state. Medicaid expansion in other states has really put a major burden on those states where their budgets have ballooned and they really have no way of getting costs under control, which then bleeds into the taxpayer, and then the taxpayer has to come up with more money. We were talking about affordability earlier. One of the things that will make our state less affordable is Medicaid expansion. Because the ugly truth is the federal government cannot continue to pay for Medicaid expansion the way it was promised under Barack Obama. Two, the Affordable Care Act, or really the Unaffordable Care Act, is not helping. That entire program needs to be reformed. So it's not about Florida doing more, it's about the federal government doing what is right, which is reforming that health insurance law so people have more options to get lower cost policies that they can afford while still accessing health care. That's going to be critically important going forward. Subsidies going to health insurance companies is not the answer. And the only people advocating for that are the Democrats and insurance companies. They're advocating for it. And I get the cost burden on people because they went to go reapply for their health insurance or seeing these premiums spike. But let's be clear about why that is. It's because Obamacare is broken. It was written and designed for health insurance premiums to consistently rise over time. And the answer from the Democrats would be, oh, well, we just need single payer health care, or we just need Medicaid for all. That's actually the Bernie Sanders plan. That's the AOC plan. That's what they want to do. That is not going to be the answer for health insurance and healthcare costs in Florida or anywhere else in America. So my position is clear. Senator Rick Scott, our senator, Representative August Pfluger of Texas, they have a very good bill that would reform the Affordable Care Act space, actually decrease health insurance premiums for people here in Florida and all through the country, where you wouldn't have to go and borrow money from America's future, from America's kids, to pay for health insurance premiums today. That's the actual answer. And let's be very clear. These subsidies, they don't fix the problem. They just cover the problem. We have to actually have real solutions that have real results in the lives of people. That's what we should be doing going forward.
Vaccine mandates.
Yes.
There's a lot of talk about eliminating those, but there's also, we see concern from parents who send their kids to school and don't want to see, some of those things spread. Where do you stand on that, and how do you address some of those concerns?
Well, look, I've already answered this in a couple of areas. When it comes to the vaccines that came out through rulemaking, I think that those should not be mandated. That stuff was not mandated by the state legislature, signed by any governor in the history of our state. That's stuff that the Department of Health just threw on the mandated list. I have 3 sons, okay? I've seen the vaccination schedule change from my oldest son, who was 22, to the one who's 14. And it's been more vaccines required from the 14-year-old than from the 22-year-old. That doesn't change the health criteria of my sons. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to the ones that are mandated, I think there's a serious conversation that's going to be had about polio, the polio vaccine. That's something that only the state legislature can pass through both chambers. We'll see what the legislature gets accomplished this year. What I do want to see, I want parents to be able to make far more decisions about these vaccines. Even in Florida law today, a parent can choose a religious exemption to not vaccinate their children if that's what they want to do. That's in Florida law now. We'll see where the governor ends up with. I know they have a desire to go directly to informed consent. I've talked to the Surgeon General about this, Mr. Latipo, about his desire to go fully to informed consent. I think there's merit to that, but there has to be a real dialogue around polio, smallpox. I think those 2 vaccines that have been around for a very long time. But the others, no, they should not be mandated. I think those are ones where informed consent should be enough. And I think you'll see overall, let's take hepatitis B for a moment. Why are we giving a 4-month-old hepatitis B? Why are we giving them a hepatitis B vaccine at 4 months old, 2 months old, or wherever it is in the vaccine schedule today? These are the real conversations we need to have. I think another solution is actually spreading out the vaccine schedule. Why are we having newborns being jabbed with all these vaccines so early in life? If anything, spread them out. Make sure that the ones that were done in rulemaking, which I think the governor's already going to do, and I fully support that those actually are informed consent vaccines. If a parent chooses they want to do that, they can. And that's where we should be going forward.
We're almost out of time here. Want to get to know you a little bit.
Sure.
Favorite song on your campaign playlist?
Right now it's John Cena, My Time Is Now. that's what plays when we go in and out. So it's a good one.
And what would you say is your go-to meal when you've got maybe a big event coming up or something like that? What would you say is your go-to?
I'm not really a foodie. So I'm not a foodie guy. I don't have like a favorite meal. It's what's close, what's good. Let's do that, and you keep going.
What's next for you on the campaign trail?
Heading to Tampa, and then I'm going to be back in D.C. this week. And then next weekend, I don't even know where I am next week. I got to look back at the calendar. We're everywhere. We're using every day possible to campaign and get around the state. And, I'm excited about that. Might try to see if we get to Miami for the national championship, see if we can get in there for that.
All right, be rooting for the Canes in that one. That'll be something different for you.
I'm a Seminole. It's different. I haven't done this one before, but that's all right. No, I hope they win. They've done a great job this year. They have a great team. And I watched the game last night. Indiana looks tough.
Yeah, they're going to be tough to beat. Congressman Donalds, we appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.